Hi, friends and SAP users, consultants, experts, and of course, all of us of SAP. You're welcome to another training. Um, we have had series of training. Please visit my YouTube channel to get other trainings we have done in the past. For this training, for today, we're going to be looking at, we're continuing a series. The plan is to actually um, you know, take us through the S/4HANA process, especially with focus in finance through the configuration process. So it's actually a config training. We have done the part one. Please visit the YouTube channel, visit my YouTube channel for the part one of this video. For today, we're going to be looking at SAP S/4HANA Finance Configuration Part 2. And this part, or in this video, in this training, we're going to be looking at functional specifications and documentations, of course, required to run your SAP S/4HANA project. SAP has given us a lot of documentations, especially in the area of the Activate methodology, things like test scripts and aids. However, it's important that for a consultant to actually um, understand the process, before you actually begin your configuration, you have to understand a lot of these terms. You have to understand a lot of requirements. So I've seen in the past where we have trainers who just go straight into the GUI and start doing configurations, and um, I experienced that. And when the user is actually done, you have outside configuration, you have little or no knowledge about other requirements that the um, consultant or the user is expected to know. So the essence of this training is not just to rush into the configuration, but to take our time to understand what are the basic requirements needed as a consultant or as a user, and also to enlighten us on the availability of this knowledge, of the availability of these tools, and also to improve our understanding generally about SAP S/4HANA and of course other SAP modules. So let's go into the system and see um, what functional specifications are. Now, the SAP space has a lot of players. We have experts, we have functional consultants, we have technical consultants, we have specialists and the rest. Basically, the two key areas are the technical and the functional consultants. Every other role falls within these two or three areas. Now, if you're not within the ABAP space, you are most likely a functional consultant. And as a functional consultant, you need to understand what the functional specifications are and the documentations needed to, begin or continue or end your project, your SAP S/4HANA finance project. So let's see what functional specifications are and the required, the basic. We might not, this video will not actually cover all the documentations, but you will sure have, at the end of this session, have learned about the basic specifications. You should learn about what functional specifications are, and of course, the required documentations that consultants go through during a typical SAP S/4HANA finance project. So let's see that. Okay, so what are functional specifications in SAP? The functional specification describes the features of the desired functionality. It describes the product features as seen by the stakeholders and contains the technical information and data needed for the design and development. So if you have actually gone through the previous video, we talked about the various phases that a typical S/4HANA finance project will go through. We have the discovery phase or the discover phase. We have the prepare phase. We have the explore phase. And also, we have realize and run, and of course, go live and support. So basically, it's functional specification is key in one of these processes, especially from the prepare and the explore phase. We have said that, during the discovery phase, the client is given a copy of the SAP S/4HANA finance package to go through. And, during the prepare phase and the explore phase, there are discussions, there are documentation. So basically, functional specification is a major part of the prepare and the explore phase of the project. And there are a lot of discussions with stakeholders, with the business and the client. And of course, this specification contains the technical information and the data needed for the design and development of the SAP S/4HANA system. So it's a very, very, very important requirement for your SAP S/4HANA finance project. So basically, all consultants who are part of the stakeholders will need to understand what the specifications are, and that will help you even in your configuration and design. The functional specification defines what the functionality will be of a particular area that is to be prepared, that is to be precise. That's to precise a transaction in the SAP terminology. So basically, what this is saying is that if, for example, you have a specification for ARO or AP, what the specification would actually give you some precise information about what that requirements are, and that will be interpreted in the SAP terminology by, of course, the consultants and other stakeholders. The functional specification document is to create a detailed design document that explains in detail how the software will be designed and developed. So this is very important. Before this specification is done, of course, there are a lot of requirements gathering, understanding the client business, understanding the process flow, understanding the end-to-end activity of the business. And those understanding actually assist in, designing what you have as your functional specifications. The functional specification translates the software requirement template into a technical description. Of course, that is key, one of the major functions of the functional consultants. This description ensures that the product feature requirements are correctly understood. It is key, very, very important, where there are one of the problems with implementing projects, it's when you have poor understanding about the requirements. So it is important that the requirements from the business are actually translated into a template. This template would be used to define each of the business processes. And this template is also translated to a technical description. Of course, once this is currently understood, this should be currently understood before moving into the next step. So the product feature requirements for both business and both SAP, it's well understood. Of course, once the next step is to actually do the translation to the technical development process, which involves, of course, other stakeholders like those from the ABAP team. Clearly and unambiguously provides all the information. Of course, the second very important description of the functional specification is provide all information necessary for the technical consultants to develop the object. So the functional consultants are key in this process. However, they would have to work very closely with the technical consultants to begin with developing objects. Of course, from setting up the system, setting up your clients, and getting some of these specifications to do. If there are standard SAP systems that does not fit into the business requirements. The RISEFs are created and some adjustments or configurations are done. So basically, the functional consultant will have to work closely with the technical consultants to ensure that this information is ready or it's well understood. At the consultant level, the functional specifications or specs are prepared by functional consultants on any functionality for the purpose of getting the same functionality designed by the technical people. As most of the times, the functionalities according to requirements of the client are not available on ready-made basis. So, well, basically, you have a project and a client has a requirement that does not fit into the standard SAP process, like I've said. That will require you to develop a functional spec, which RISF is also a very important documentation of that process. In subsequent videos, we will discuss what the term RISF is. It's basically, forms, all the basic informations that you need to put together, and that process is designed, and the RISF document is developed and sent to the technical team to actually begin with their configurations. Yes. So basically, both functional and technical consultants work with the RISF documents. Like I said, they are specifications that the functional consultant designs, of course, with support with the technical consultants when SAP standard processes does not fit into the client's requirement. Basically, a RISF stands for, they're just acronym that stands for reports. Basically, if the reports the client requires does not fit into the standard, we have interface. If there is need for SAP to interface with the other third-party applications for the business to actually run its process, we have conversions. Conversions happen, if you need to convert from one legacy system to SAP. We have enhancement. Enhancement is one of the very key responsibility of the ABAP team. Like I said, SAP can, for example, if you have reports that or templates that the client needs or some tables that are not available in the standard, the functional consultant can work with the technical consultants to do some major enhancements on that table. We have forms like printouts, and we have workflows that basically run the approval process within the system. So basically, this is part of your functional specifications. And of course, like we said, this happens basically in the explore phase of your project. And it's moved to the realize phase, as the activity continues. So let's look at the next thing. Okay. Documentations, which basic documentation which is prepared before and in a project. So let's look at some of the documentations that are important for the functional consultant to be aware of. It's very important that before you, like I said, I've had experiences where people go into training and what they are exposed to is basically the functionalities of the software, doing your configurations and end user activities. However, you realize that when you're done and you're faced with a project, you have issues with actually fitting into the project, or because some of the basic requirements that the functional consultant is supposed to be aware of was not taught, or probably the user is not exposed to them. So the essence of this training is to bridge that gap so that the functional consultant actually understands what these requirements are, these documentations are. And when you meet a client and you have discussions you are not left out as regards, you can hold discussions as regards what you would require from them, and how you could also work with other stakeholders, other consultants to deliver on that project. So it's important to understand the documentations. It's important to you understand these requirements, and it would actually help and improve your skill, or improve your knowledge in the consulting area. So some of the documentations we have are the templates. We have heat analysis. Now, to explain further, some are they are all documentations, but some activities that the functional consultants have to carry out, of course, with support with other team members. But this is the reality, basically. The functional consultant's work is not just to configure the SAP S/4HANA system. The first thing you will do, according to the various phases, is you will have to go through your prepare phase and explore phase. But key is the prepare phase. And in the prepare phase, you need all this documentation, all or some, depending on the type of business or the type of project you're engaged in. So it's important that the functional consultant understands this process or these requirements, so that you can effectively engage with the business and understand what the business process is all about, so that when you're doing your configurations, it's an easy go ride. So we'll look at what templates are, we'll look at heat analysis, we'll look at fit and gap analysis, we'll look at the business process design and model, change and impact, business change and impact, configuration design, which of course is just about 5% of total SAP. But basically, configuration is, we're going to discuss that. That's the end product of what we want to do. But of course, things like the org structure and the enterprise structure, you need to be aware of that. Those are part of the config designs. We have future impact and change assessments. We have a functional design. We have risk assessment. We have process metrics and many more. Of course, which has impact on business and its workflow. We have software requirements specifications. We have test documents. We have end user training documents, and we have data migration documents. And of course, any other report that is very necessary to the success of your project, or depending on what the business requirement is. So it's very key that a consultant knows that your job is not just about configuring the system. It starts from the discover phase and the prepare phase, and of course down to all the phases that the project will have to go through. So let's look at some of these explanations or definitions. And at the end of this session, you should, this video would not cover everything, but with having this information, you should go on, do your research and improve your understanding about what the requirements of being a consultant is, or what additional skill, for those who are already consultants, additional skills you need to, or information you need to have to improve on your assignment. Of course, we have a note there that, of course, implementation differ from one project to another. So, but this is good information for you. Now, let's look at some of the definitions and, improve on our knowledge. Now, what are templates in SAP? If an SAP standard template approximately matches your company specifications or the business requirements, but requires minor changes, you can copy the standard template and change the copy. So a template in SAP is like an already made design. And sometimes it could be a form, like I've said, it could be reports. So basically what it's saying is that if the SAP standard templates matches with the business requirements, and of where there are discussions and the business feels, oh, well, we have this template, but I think SAP's own is more detailed. Then what does the functional consultant do? You just have to copy that standard template, and the ABAP team can make some changes to it and make it usable for the client. Of course, the next is heat analysis. Heat analysis is something to do with critical business processes, which the client feels are important. So heat analysis is an analysis that will be carried out by the functional consultants. Basically, as the prepare phase or the discussions, the business might feel that there is a process that is not existing in their legacy system, and they would want to see that being used in SAP. That analysis will be done, and of course, the consultants will do the subsequent mapping into the SAP S/4HANA system. So it's also a very important documentation. The next is fit and gap analysis. This is a very, very important document or process that happens, within the explore and realize phase. A fit gap methodology is used to identify the areas in which the newly planned system or business process of course, the client organization fits or does not fit according to the SAP standards or needs. So you go for a project and they want their invoice is in a particular form because of the peculiarity of their customers, and you look at the SAP invoice printout or form, they're different. It doesn't fit. In some cases, it can fit. In some cases, when it's a case of when it fits, then it's fine. If it doesn't fit, then of course a gap has been established. It basically determines the components that fit into the business goal and the standard SAP process and the gaps that need to be fixed. The main objective of a fit gap analysis is to identify any captured delta business requirements and gaps which might not have been captured in the pre-activated or pre-assembly solution, which is the sandbox. Of course, sandbox is the first system that the ABAP team will have to develop, where basically the functional consultants will have to begin their configurations from before, of course, it's moved to the development system. Okay, now basically what this is saying is that fit gap analysis helps the functional consultant and indeed the team to understand what fits into the SAP standard, SAP S/4HANA standard system, and the gaps that are available. These gaps, as I've explained, will have to be summarized in a RISEF document, which will be developed by the functional consultants. And once that document is finished or completed, of course, there will be discussions with the ABAP team on how to close out on some of these gaps. For each gap, there will be one of three outcomes which must be recorded and actioned. Gap must be closed, and customized software can be developed to close gaps. Gap must be closed by software closed, but of course, but software that cannot be written there for basically what it's trying to say is that it is important that the gaps be closed if it's a very key important business process. Where these gaps cannot be closed by SAP, the RISEF will also recommend if enhancements cannot fit that process, of course, we have to look for interfaces that can be used to close that gap. For example, in the marine industry, the sales order, because we have things like peculiar to a particular industry, things like the manifest, and all the processes that the shipping industry goes through. For example, if we don't have a manifest system where you book for containers, if that system is not available in the SAP and an enhancement cannot be done, of course, we can, the RISEF or the consultant can suggest to the client of an interface software that can interface with SAP and data will be received into SAP when that that process actually happens. So, but it's important that the analysis is done. The ones that fit is closed. The ones that don't fit, you do some enhancements, forms, or workflows. If that will not solve the problem, we'll go for interface. But these are all very important suggestions or very important activities that the functional consultant is supposed to be aware of. Now, future impact and change assessment. It's also a very important document. Like I said, the work of a consultant is not just about configuration, but you need to really understand these processes. Okay, so basically a change impact assessment defines how changes affect target audiences and of course, their transition from the legacy system to, of course, the SAP. The impact assessment describes the high-level changes in organization, skill, knowledge, culture, process, and system requirements, and how each change is expected to affect key stakeholders of group. So, of course, when the process of moving from a legacy system to SAP is a major change within an organization, in order to, of course, improve on their digital transformation process, and of course take advantage of the functionality the SAP S/4HANA system provides. However, that change is, I mean, it actually has effect within the business, and it's important the consultant is aware of this, and future impact and change assessments would help to better manage the clients. Of course, we know that change is not easy for everybody. Change comes with some resistance in most cases, and it's important that the top management is very, very supportive of the change process. And when this assessment is done, it will actually assist consultants and other stakeholders to approach their job with some form of understanding and support and empathy. And for some people who are change adverse or who are late changed, who adopt change late, there is actually this assessment can help us manage them better. So it's important, very, very important. Now we have risk assessment. Risk assessment is a term used to describe the overall process or method where you identify hazards and risk factors that have potential to cause harm, for this project. So it's important that consultants, like I said, need to have a little knowledge about risk assessment. If you go to a client environment and the environment is not safe, you get to the database and you see some hazards within the environment, it is very important that you raise these risk or these hazards with the client, and that will actually also give the client the confidence that you're not just around to do your SAP job, but you're also interested in making sure that you do your work safely. So it's important that this assessment is done by the team members, and it will also support the consultants and improve their knowledge about identifying risk and reporting same. We have a software requirement specification, SRS. Now, it's a document that describes what the software will do and how it will be expected to perform. It also describes the functionality the product needs to fulfill, of course, the product needs that, and of course, how that will fulfill all stakeholders. So basically, it's a very important documentation. As a functional consultant or a technical consultant, you understand what SAP is. You understand after your, the discovery phase, you should have, seen, and of course, developing your blueprint document, you should have seen key areas where SAP would actually affect their processes. So the business blueprint will carry most of these informations. And of course, how the system would help bridge some of those gaps, how the system will help improve their process, um, improve the business process, give them access to information as at when due, enhance effective reporting, and of course, the ability to work from anywhere in the world. So this is important. This is a very important requirement on documentations that the consultants, both functional and technical, are supposed to be aware of. Now we have data migration documents. Of course, we have the data migration processes that happens in the realize phase. Of course, in the initial phase, there is need to get legacy information or data from the client. They can be data, they can be, of course, your master data, customer master data, vendor master data, geo master data, chart of accounts, balances, bank statements, balance brought forward from previous years, the balance sheet balances, audited reports, and so on. These are very important because these informations will need, the company is not ending, so it's actually continuing. So there will be need to bring in especially balance sheet balances into the system and migrate other master data information. And these documents would detail what those master data, what will be required what is required for migration, all the requirements that are needed, and all the data that the business will need to provide. Okay, so those are one other very important document is the business process design. So basically, whether you're in S4HANA, you're in ERP, or L3, it applies. Real business scenarios are being reproduced in the system and give value to the client, every day. That's what is expected of SAP. Now, understanding business process is very important, but it's not so much of a big deal, especially important from the beginner's perspective when you are in the learning journey and you are new to the SAP world. But basically, it is the most important thing that the consultants and all the stakeholders need to do before you design, before you implement, before you configure. You must take your time to understand the business process end to end in finance and controlling. So what this means is that you pick them in modules, discuss what the AR is, how do you raise your invoices? Do you use sales orders? How do you receive payments from customers? How do you treat refunds? What are the procure to pay processes? What are the order to cash processes? How do you report to relevant authorities? How do you carry out your tax remittance and a whole lot? So it is important that but basically the business process design is all about designing or putting on paper what the business process of the business is really all about. That can go through a process flow, diagram, to map, these business requirements with the SAP functionality. SAP is a complex cross-functional ERP system with several integrated modules. Of course, FI is the base. FI is the connecting factor. So FI is the root. Like you have a tree and you have branches. What supplies the branches with nutrients is the roots. So FI is the roots. FICO actually the roots of the SAP system where other modules, other branches connect to. So there can be no it starts from as it begins outside the client when you begin your configuration from creating a company to creating a company code, assigning your company code to your company, and all those processes. Without these, no other functional consultants can actually begin work. So it's important that you understand the integration between the finance and every other of these modules. Very, very important. In order to ensure implementation success, of course, performing end-to-end process designs for each process, for each business process, you need to understand the business process on one hand of the client, and also understand the SAP finance and control process and how SAP integrates with other modules. Another important thing at the, of course, at this point is to look at business process from SAP modules perspective. So some of the questions that would be asked is that, what is the main SAP module involved in this process? So you're discussing with the client and the client say, wow, we actually raise an invoice. However, this invoice is not tied to sale. It's not part of our regular sales invoice. It's just probably when we want to dispose assets. So as a functional consultant, you should know that the FI invoice would be required for that process if it's not used for direct sales, which would be used, which would go through the order to cash, process. So you should understand the module that will be involved in any of these processes. It could be procure to pay, it could be, plant maintenance, it could be warehouse management and all that. What additional SAP modules are involved in this process? So outside the FICO standard modules or the core module, what additional modules required to support this activity? It could be BCM, it could be PP, it could be Ariba, So basically, these are very, very important information that the process design document is supposed to have and the functional consultant is supposed to know. So what are the integration points between FI, especially to each and every other of these modules? So of course, the integration point between FI and MM, you have the OBYC, the integration point between SD and finance. You need to know that point. The GL is the major factor between the integration with finance and other modules, because the general ledgers are the books of original entry. Information from other modules must be tied to a GL, and the GL is tied to financial statement versions and all of that, and the process goes on. So you need to understand these integration points and how other modules speak to finance. Okay, so basically, let's look at the concept of blueprints. Blueprint is a very important documentation in SAP. It is part of the functional specifications and the documentations that are required. Like we have said, that outside when you have your business process design, you need a document to be able to carry out that would be like that would carry out, that would pick all these individual processes and present them present them to the management. So the business blueprint document is a detailed description of a company's business process and system requirements. So like I've said, this is business process. All these other documentations will have to go into the business blueprint. It is a key implementation document, very, very important, because all the end-to-end processes of all the modules would go into the business blueprint. The SAP Business Blueprint document shows all the important configurations setting to adapt the ERP, of course, the S/4HANA system to the SAP, to the company's need or to the client's need. A well-defined SAP blueprint acts as a foundation for successful implementation of the SAP system. It includes a number of activities, events, milestones, and deliverables. Very, very important document. The SAP Blueprint document focuses on understanding, authenticating, and documenting project scope, specifications. This happens within the prepare phase and the explore phase of the project. SAP Blueprint document template also helps to define the objective conceptually and practically. So like we talked about the templates, these are important requirements for the blueprint document. Okay, so of course, using this, you can create a questionnaire for the system users. You can, circulate this to the business owners. These questionnaires are feedbacks from the clients, about their business processes. All that will be imputed in a business blueprint document. So how do you create a business blueprint or a template? First, you have to develop a process for inventory that's collecting all the type of processes. We have said you can use questionnaires, you can get source documents, you can look at study the process by physically watching and all that. Of course, these are important steps within the prepare phase. These steps may help you to start thinking regarding process orders. You can plan to implement, your current SAP S/4HANA system. The second is to create a foundation for building business blueprint. This stage helps you to develop the scope of the SAP project. This happens within the prepare phase. The project scope carries all the information about the project, the time, the requirements, the stakeholders, the funding, and every other important information of that project. So developing the project scope is very important to the business blueprint. You need to create a plan before you begin to work on your new SAP S/4HANA system. That plan has to be embedded in the SAP blueprint. Now, the third is create blueprint. Creating the blueprint involves understanding where a responsibility changes occur to a department. The step needs to apply the information by explaining which department or individual is working for which part of the process from the beginning to the end. So basically, this has to do with, this is now about understanding the business process and also advising the client on the best department or the best people or the best office that would handle this process, because it is not your normal legacy system. When you come into the XAP, a lot of tasks are actually, because of the very standard workflows, we have a lot of responsibilities, tasks are broken down effectively. So you need to also understand the business and advise the client on, the end-to-end of these processes and who would be responsible. Another very important of how to create, you have to estimate time and cost while you're setting your project goals. Very important for your SAP project plan. Verify the blueprint. Of course, the blueprint will have to be discussed or shared within all the, especially the team members within SAP, and of course the business and the client. This allows you to make sure that your created SAP business blueprint document should be able to reflect the reality. Very, very important. And of course, there are sometimes that you need to make adjustments to this blueprint. So of course, deploy improvement techniques, follow organized approach for improving business process by using methods to like evaluating value added activity, removing the redundancy, reducing processing time. So these are some of the very key functionalities that the SAP S/4HANA has over the ECC platform. So we need to, highlight these processes when we are discussing with the client. Let them know let them know how SAP S/4HANA can actually help improve some of these processes, and advise them on the duplication of some processes and make sure that their processes it's geared towards removing redundancy, removing the time it takes to process a transaction. For example, some legacy process might require 4 or 5 approvals, depending on what the business. I mean, the security in SAP, you can advise based on this process, and why not, trim down your approval levels to 3 or 4, and this can also help. And of course, SAP has the functionality of giving responsibilities if a particular approver is not around. Okay, so it's very important we discuss this improvement techniques with the business, and of course, the very analytical automation that and AI that has been introduced into SAP can also help them analyze their business data. The next is to develop internal control metrics. You have to work with the auditors to design an effective internal control, which would basically work around a user cannot start and finish a process at the same time. So these are one of the checks: proper approval of documents, proper verification, before a document is approved, invoices or source documents should be attached and all of that. So we can develop these internal control metrics for the business. So basically the functional consultants, especially within the FICO space, should be able to not just configure, like I've said, but should have ideas, should contribute a lot to the table when it comes to understanding basic document requirements and how to improve on the business process. So what are the benefits of the blueprint document? We have it helps end users to understand what the solution will look like. It offers solid foundation to support organizational change. It helps to eliminate the risk of losing market share or reputation. SAP Blueprint template helps you to define all the critical success factors and key performance indicators for your SAP S/4HANA deployment project. Of course, you have the project scope, you have the time, start and finish time for your project, you have the budget, and benefits to implement tested improvement technology, and a lot more. I mean, template offers better project delivery, review and discuss the current business process. So once you have this document, this review can happen between the SAP team and the business, and one after the other, if there is need to adjust any of the processes, or the business need to understand what the business blueprint document is saying and how it affects or how it will affect the operations. So of course, we have part of, okay, I think this is part of the how to create. Sorry about that. You can conduct a trial run. It's part of creating your blueprint. You can implement the changes and follow up with continuous improvements. These are very, very important information that the functional consultant should know or should have. Of course, credit goes to Scott Livingston for some of the information here. Now, thank you for watching this session. Remember, like I've said, that to be a very effective and efficient SAP consultant, you have to go beyond. Its configuration is one side. Understanding business processes and documentations is a very important requirement for the SAP S/4HANA FICO consultant, and even whatever module you're in, as long as you're a consultant, both technical and functional, you need to understand what the functionalities are. You need to understand what the business is saying. You need to understand the basic document requirements. You need to be able to engage the business and get information when you go through the first 3 phases of the project: discovery, prepare, and explore. These are very, very important informations and information. And I believe that you have learned something from this. Why not? Please don't keep the knowledge to yourself. When you see such, you share on YouTube, share on LinkedIn. And why not, you can reach me via my email or my phone number. Thank you once again for finding your time to go through. We are going to, for our next class, we're going to be looking at the SAP system environments, which is the part 3. of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you get updates for our, videos that will be coming up very soon. So thank you very much. My name once again is Kelechi, and I'm your SAP S4 FICU consultant. Please drop your comments, and why not do reach me when you can. Do have a nice day. Thank you.